or other caregivers do to help? Well, it's not like help carry the burden because it's their burden. It's their children, but what can they do in partnership with the educators in their child's life to make it, I don't know if the word is easier, but helping that child navigate this unstable, it's kind of like you're on one of those boards that keeps going up and down and sliding in around, and it's not from day to day, from hour to hour, it's in a different direction.
Well, I think part of it is recognizing that we may never understand exactly what that child is experiencing because we're not that child, right? Even though we may be part of that family system, we may be connected in some way as a friend or a colleague or, a relative of some kind. We don't know what that child is experiencing because everyone's lived experience is different. And so I think it's important for there to be open communication, open connection, and collaboration so that we can create, in essence, like a wraparound type of care for that child. So what is it that the child needs? And sometimes it's just asking, hey, like, what do you need in this moment? The child may not know. They may have no idea. And that's okay, right? We shouldn't necessarily expect them to know because sometimes, especially depending on the developmental age of the kid, right? If we're talking about elementary school students, even middle school students, they may not have the ability to contextualize exactly what's happening and then conceptualize, okay, this is what I need to be okay. But asking them still, right? Because that informs the child that their voice matters. What's happening for them is noticed, is seen, right? So that goes back to that feeling seen, feeling heard, creating like transparent and open communication with the child, because that can help, that goes a long way to help repair that loss of safety that the child may be experiencing, which we commonly see with individuals who've experienced some form of trauma. And so as the individuals, like the system, that child's system, come together, understanding we may want to make it better in some way. We don't know how, but we're going to figure it out, right? So that's that open dialogue, that open communication that's necessary. And then maybe there are, things that can be brainstormed, right? Like ensuring that there is someone who's always available for the child should they need to reach out for any type of support. Ensuring they know where to go to find that support. That's a critical piece, right? Setting routine, creating structure that is consistent from when they wake up, go to school, when they come home in the evening, to when they go to bed, that there's a consistent structure and routine that happens, because that, again, goes a long way to try and to repair, in some ways, that lack of safety that the child may be experiencing in the wake of the trauma.
I think we forget, I think we do forget how much the children actually understand what is going on. Because these are the same children who are often put into the role of translating. So they understand, the gas bills and power bills and rent and going to the doctor. It seems almost overwhelming that they now have to deal with this when you're 8 years old.
Yeah.
I guess there's no solution to that, though.
I think part of it is that transparency, right? That empowerment. We want to protect our children. We want to protect them from the horrors of life, whatever they may be. And also, I think we sometimes forget that children are not stupid. They pay attention. They know a little bit more about what's happening than we think they do, or we like to believe that they do. And so that's why it comes back to what I was saying in the beginning, having those conversations, right? Recognizing, acknowledging that we know this is happening. You may have been affected by this, and here's how we can support you. Here are the things that we want to do to support you. Here are the avenues, here are the resources that are available, not just to you, but also to your family. And so that's why I think, yes, you have these conversations in the classrooms, you have these conversations in assemblies, you have these conversations in parent-teacher meetings, in PTA meetings, right? Like, you just have these conversations so that everyone is on the same page. Don't have the conversation with the child off to the side.
Mm-hmm.
Have the conversation with the kid, because ultimately, if you're not telling them, they're going to try and figure out, well, I want to know what's happening. So where do I need to go? How can I find out? Right. And you want to have the conversation because you're having the conversation in a caring and supportive way. That doesn't mean that you are like altering, or necessarily you may be filtering some things, but that you are not allowing the child just to go exploring on their own, because oftentimes what they will find will be much harder, much rougher for them to take. And it may further a lack of understanding of what are the supports that are in place for them, thereby escalating their emotional dysregulation, the stress that they're experiencing. And that's not something we want for our children.
Do we have any sense of what kind of long-term impact this might have in those kids? The reason I ask, and this is a very personal thing, is my parents were civil rights activists. So I regularly saw law enforcement's interaction. It took my mother years, and I look like this. No, my mother looked like you. It took my mother years to get me to the point where I could trust the police officer. You see all the officer friendly, the policemen are your friends. I did not grow up. Based on what I saw from a very personal experience, they were not my friends. So now you have, much to the chagrin to regular local law enforcement, people claiming they're police, wearing something that says police, but really they're not. And a child is seeing that. It has to, that's a very simple experience that one can appreciate. But there have to be other visceral experiences that are going to shape how these children see the world as they grow up, and the adults who are supposed to be trusted figures. Not just the teachers, because as far as we're talking about, they are actually creating the safe spaces. But teachers aren't the only adults in the world. Can we envision yet what that will be like for them?
I mean, I think there has been a lot of research that has been done on, adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, where we know that when children experience a certain number of ACEs, it leads to difficulty, not just emotionally, but also physically, biologically, right? Yeah. We see increases in certain chronic conditions as they age in life. And that said, right, that lack of trust that you talked about, that I got a sense just as you were talking that was something very affecting to you and still is to this day. That is a common experience for individuals who've experienced trauma.
Yeah.
And so this specific type of trauma, right, the loss of family, the loss of parents, caregivers, siblings, friends, that will lead inevitably to a lack of trust, not just in terms of relationships, making bonds, right, forming bonds, things of that nature, but just a lack of trust in the system, a lack of trust in the political system, lack of trust, in the idea that things will work out, things will be okay if you work hard, if you do what you need to do, like you and your family will be okay.
If you play by the rules, you'll be okay.
Exactly. Because we see that that's not happening for people. People have been playing by the rules. They've, been showing up, for appointments and things. And yet still they're being detained and so forth. And so adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, yes, like I said, we know there's been a lot of research that's been done over the years to show how detrimental they are to the health and well-being, the development of the individual long-term, and how it affects the person's lifespan. And so I think one of the things that is important for us to consider is how do we create systems, we create spaces that in essence can counteract or attempt to counteract. So you mentioned in your experience that you had your parent, your mother, who worked really hard to kind of reverse or reinstill that trust, if you will. And I think that's part of what we're talking about here, creating spaces where students begin to feel some form of control, some form of trust, of they can reclaim their agency, they can experience still healthy growth and development in the face of or in spite of what has happened to them. So we talk about resilience, we can talk about post-traumatic growth, we can measure how an individual was before the trauma, how they were after the trauma to identify if there's been any growth that's happened. I think there are a lot of ways that we can counteract or act in a protective manner for students who are experiencing this type of trauma. It's not an easy ask, right? This is going to take all of us, in essence, right? So when we think about this conversation we're having here today at CSUN, what are we doing to interface with the high schools and middle schools and elementary schools? What are the schools doing to interface with the families? What are the families doing to interface with children, right? It's kind of like, I don't like trickle down. I don't like that word because I think that evokes certain things. But it really is, how are we all coming together to support these students who are experiencing this trauma?
It almost takes a village.
Yes.
But we need to expand our village because it seems right now the burden of helping these children navigate this trauma, and I use the term caregiver because the parents may suddenly be in the concentration camp. So I almost feel like the burden's falling on the educators and the caregivers who themselves, given the circumstances, are experiencing similar trauma. So it sounds to me we need a bigger village.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. And I think that's where educators, not only in P-12 education, but in higher education, can really step in to offer support, to offer ways of engaging, right? Training around mindfulness, training around self-care, how to have these difficult conversations with students. Because we're asking teachers to, yes, like have this conversation with your student, recognize, acknowledge what is happening for them, knowing that there may be something that's happening for you, right?
Yeah. But how? It's not like, it's so simple. Every kid is exactly the same.
Exactly. And it's the recognition that not every kid is the same, right? Each of them has a different lived experience. Each of them may be struggling in different ways. And so knowing that, you are in essence creating a community of peer support, right, for the students. You're creating spaces where they can feel emboldened, if you will, to seek support in their peers, to seek support not only in the teacher or in the counselor, or the psychologist, or the administrator, but hey, I know that I can reach out because this person was in the room with me. This person had heard the same thing, and I know this person and I feel comfortable with this person. So how are we creating spaces that allow for that development? That's one of the practices in trauma-informed practice or healing-centered practice is peer support. That's one of the key critical areas connected to that. And so we here right, in higher education, it's almost like, I believe personally, we have a like a moral responsibility to engage with educators in P12 to support them as they are supporting the students, right? Like, we are all in this together, because the children who are being affected, who are experiencing this trauma, these are children who are going to grow up and ultimately will be coming to college, right? And so it really is important for us to be engaged in that narrative, in that dialogue with individuals, to create sustainable practices that can be utilized day in and day out.
So you're talking, I mean, it's interesting, you emphasize sustainable. So we're talking about, and it may be the wrong word, but pragmatic, realistic, but malleable practices. Not suddenly, oh, we're going to go shoot for the stars and the moon. We don't have time to get all the way up into space.
I would love it. But no, let's focus on what's happening right now. What is the need right now to support the students, to support the teachers? What needs to happen right now, and how can we accomplish that?
It sounds to me we need safe spaces or calming corners, depending on your age. I can see that really working with a 5-year-old, but I do not see a 16-year-old say I'm going to a calming corner.
And it may not, it may be termed differently.
Safe spaces.
Perhaps it's, it's someone's office or it's someone's classroom, because we know teachers have free periods. And I still remember my teachers from high school, the ones who had a significant impact on my development at that particular point in my life.
I can name those teachers.
Right? So can I. And so I think it's really important for the older populations, okay, we're having these conversations, and here are designated spaces where you can go to on campus at any point in time, right? And maybe the protocol is slightly different. So the student just doesn't get up and walk out of class and the teacher's like, hey, where are you going? Maybe it's a hand salute or a signal or something that identifies, I am here and I need to step out of this situation for a moment, right? So that the student can just identify that. They can get up, they can walk out, and they can go to that teacher's free period or whatever space has been created on campus where they can, just kind of regulate their emotions in that moment.
And it also sounds, I think of also my favorite teacher, the one who impacted me the most, isn't necessarily the same for someone else.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
But what's uniform, whether you're in kindergarten or you're in 10th grade, is having a trusted person who listens. I think that's true for us now.
Yeah. And it may not even be that they need to listen, that they're just there, that this is a space that has been identified, and I feel comfortable going into the space with no expectations. There are no expectations that I'm going to divulge what exactly is happening for me right now. Because I think sometimes that's overwhelming for the individual, right? Like, I'm having the big emotions, I'm having the feelings, whatever it's happening. Yeah. And now the only way I can access this space that is supposed to be safe, where I can feel comfortable in that moment, is by sharing exactly what's happening for me. We don't want to do that to students because they may not be able to articulate.
May not be ready.
Or they may not be ready. They may not be at a place where they can, just kind of open that, because once they open it, they can't close it, right? And so we really want to ensure that the individuals know, the students know, okay, there's no expectation here. I don't have to go into all of the details about everything that's happening for me in this moment. I can just go and I can be. I can just sit. I can work on coloring something, or I can play with some Play-Doh, because even high school students like playing with Play-Doh.
Wow.
I can go and I can do this thing, or I can just breathe.
And then the third thing that stuck out in my mind is taking time for oneself, right? That's like the third. You kind of need to let the 7-year-old take time to just be. But what the grown-ups, and sometimes I would think an older sibling, while they're in high school or middle school, still will forget they're allowed to be themselves for a little bit.
Yeah, because we don't think of, I would say we don't commonly think of, 5, 6, 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds as having, right, like as being their own independent individual person. That is not a common thing. It's like, you're the child. That's it. You're going to act the way that I tell you to act, basically. And as you grow and you mature, yes, I'll give you maybe more freedom and more agency and things of that nature. But really, it's important to understand that from the time a child is born, they have their own personality. They are their own person, right? And allowing them space to grow, to develop, to understand feelings, the feelings that they're having, so that they can articulate those feelings, right? That's a critical part of development. And I think we're getting a little bit better with that as a society. But in the face of trauma, sometimes it's more about how do we just protect them? Like, how do we shield them, shelter them from what's happening? Which means that we're not listening to them. We're not hearing what they're saying. And it's important to recognize that sometimes the child, they're not communicating with just their words. Their communication may be behavioral. They may be acting out. They may be, flipping things over, throwing things, yelling, screaming. And if we're not paying attention to that, we're missing those cues. We're missing that, oh, that's them actually telling us that they're not okay, that something is wrong, right? And so that's why it's critical to recognize, this is that part of that tracking, that being present, to understand what's happening for the students in the classroom, right? If the student is just kind of all of a sudden, now they're flipping over desks, when that was not a behavior that they had explained or had previously, that means something.
Yeah.
That's the way that they can communicate, or they're communicating these big feelings that they're having. And sometimes those big feelings, because they haven't had the space to really share or articulate, verbalize, they don't know how to say, I'm hurting, I'm upset, I'm angry, my parent is gone, my sibling is gone, my grandparent is gone, and I don't know when I'll see them again, right? Like, there is an effect, this profound loss that the child is experiencing that they can't necessarily verbalize. And so that's why we really need to pay attention and be attuned to the behaviors that we're seeing in the classroom.
It just hit me because circumstances that cause grief and the loss of a loved one happen all the time. They happen, someone gets cancer, someone was in a car accident, heart attack. There are unforeseen circumstances that can be incredibly traumatizing and separating. But in this situation, you have the compounded conundrum of, in many instances, they were doing, the person who has disappeared, had been taken away, been arrested, detained, was doing everything right. They were showing up to court hearing. And the people who took them away are the people the child was raised by their parents and the people in their society as people who allegedly are looking out for their best interests. So now you've got that whole world of what I thought were safe, the safe spaces in my world. If I do the right thing, I will be okay. And the governmental officials and their designated law enforcement representatives are supposed to be my protectors. Oh, I can't imagine being 8 years old and have that being thrown. It's hard enough as an adult to figure this out.
And I think that's where we get trauma just in general.
Yes.
There's often this feeling of lack of safety. It's like I wake up and the world is not as safe as I thought it was. But in this situation, as you just described, these are people, individuals who I thought were supposed to keep me safe, to keep my family safe. And wait, now you've taken my family away, right? And now I don't feel safe. And I don't think I can trust the system going forward, like we were talking about earlier. Yeah. And I think also in this specific type of trauma, this specific experience, this loss, as you mentioned, the other forms of loss that can just show up, whether it's cancer, car accident, things of that nature, you know what has happened. This person is gone because they battled cancer and they ultimately lost their battle, or they had a car accident and they're no longer here, or this thing happened and they've been lost to incarceration. Yeah. Right. There, you know what has happened. It's a clear
A to B.
Exactly. But here, what we have is, wait, they went to work or they went to court and now they're just gone and no one will tell us what has happened. Exactly. We don't know where they are. We don't know what has happened to them. We have no answers. There's no information. We don't even know why
they were picked up.
Exactly.
Except, they all had brown skin.
Exactly.
I have brown skin.
And so it's a compounding of factors, right, that really adds to this lack of safety that the individual may be experiencing. Because really it's I could just be walking down the street and someone could just take me, and this is the world I live in now.
And then someone who take me is not that stranger danger. It's someone in a uniform I was told to go to if I felt I was in danger.
Exactly.
That just turns it. I don't envy teachers, to school counselors, because it also applies to them as well.
It does. It does, because they may be having a parallel process.
Yeah.
They may be experiencing a loss of a family member who was there one day and is now gone. And now they're contending with, what do we do in the aftermath of this person being gone? And so that parallel process, right, it's happening concurrently with what's happening in the lives of the students who they are there to support. And in some ways, we think about, for teachers, for counselors, right, having that perspective, how does that potentially help you to be present for the students who are experiencing this similar type of experience? But it doesn't, you don't have to have experienced the thing to be able to support the student. But I think going back to the parallel process piece, right, that's why it's so critical to understand what's happening for you. So as you're sitting with the student, as you are bearing the weight of what they're experiencing, as they have, they may have chosen you as that safe person where they feel comfortable disclosing all of the feelings, all of the experiences that they have had, recently as it relates to the loss of the family member, right? Checking in with yourself to understand what's coming up for you. How is that affecting me personally? And what do I need to do so that I can be okay, right? That I can be okay and continue to be present for the child.
We're asking everybody in an educational setting to be understanding and patient in ways they may not have thought they needed to be patient in the past. You have anything else to add, or I could keep talking to you forever, and I realize we've been talking an hour.
Has it been an hour already?
Almost, yes.
Oh, wow. Yeah, time flies.
Anything else you wanted to add?
Well, I think one thing is just that back to that patience piece. I think there needs to be patience, not only, right, patience for the children, 100%. Patience for yourself, right? Giving yourself grace in the moment. Not, if you don't know how to handle a situation or you don't know what to say, know that that's okay. Because we are in an unprecedented time. This is not a time that many of us, ever thought we would see in our lifetime. And so recognizing that I don't know what to say, and that's okay. And also recognizing that there are resources out there to support you, right? Wherever they may be, within your district, outside of your district,
If they're matadors, can they call the Iceman
Yes,
College?
absolutely. Absolutely. We are here to support you. We have so many individuals who are connected with school districts, not just in educational psychology and counseling, but in other departments within the College of Education as well, right? So if you need resources, please don't hesitate to reach out. And I know that many of my colleagues are already working in the schools, providing resources and supports to the teachers, administrators, and counselors that are doing this very, very challenging work.
And I know why you say people who become teachers, it's a calling. Because they have angel wings. No one can see them in the back.
I 100% believe that.
Dr. Minton, it's been an amazing conversation. I truly, truly appreciate you having it with me. And I hope those of you who joined us today for this episode of Diving into the Discourse learned as much as I did and actually listened to and take some of Dr. Minton's advice. Thank you again. Don't forget, you can find Diving into the Discourse on the Cease and Conversation website or on YouTube or on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts, where you can also find our sister podcast, Matador Memories, which explores the history of California State University, Northridge, and its impact in the area.